Well, hello and welcome to Uncut and Unfiltered Cosmetology Insights with Nathan Shaw, the show where we help aspiring and current beauty professionals master both the business and the craft of cosmetology so that you can build a long, successful career. I'm your host, Andy Traub. Today, we're going to talk about something very specific, which is a color consultation. So I'm just going to talk for the intro, and then I'm going to throw it to you, Nathan, and I want you to talk to the listeners about how do you define what a color consultation is? What's the situation where you would have that? And then why is what you teach different than maybe what's normal? And then how does it help? How does it help the stylist and the client have a more successful working relationship and better outcomes?
Absolutely. Okay. Great.
So tell me at the beginning, what is unique or important about a color consultation? What is the way most people do it to begin with? And then what do you teach that's unique?
I'm not sure how unique it is other than we do what we call the 5 steps to formulation. Because as I talked about before, every hair color it's a little bit of an algebra equation, right? But just like anything, you have to know where you're starting, where you're going, and then how to get there, right? So part of that is determining their the first step is you got to determine what hair color they're starting with. Like what level it is. Is it artificial or is it their natural pigment? Meaning, like, have they already colored their hair? Um,
Okay.
then you got to, because you got to know what your starting point is. After that, you got to determine what's your desired level, and level is basically the depth, how light or dark a hair color is. You have to determine where they're going, and then the third step is there any percentage of gray hair that you have to deal with? Because gray hair takes color a little differently. And then the fourth step is you determine the developer strength you're going to need to get those results. And then that fifth step is basically determining what tones you're going to either enhance. So if you want like a redhead, you might like add more copper to it to make it more vibrant, or maybe you want to tone
Yeah.
down the red, or it may be a color you want to neutralize. Maybe you're going to lift them into a blonde that's got yellow gold undertones, and you're going to need to use
Hmm.
some violet and blue to make sure it doesn't look brassy, right? And it's
Hmm.
those 5 steps. The other thing I really stress that I guess it's a pet peeve. I can't stand when you have stylists, they'll go out or not go out, but they'll go get the swatches and they'll bring those back to the guest to pick a hair color. And
Tell me why
that's
that's
kind of
bad.
it's a very old school way that people did things, I think, number one. But number two, it happens to be it's like what the other problem that creates is so many stylists will look at the swatch and they think it's like painting a white wall, meaning like, oh, if I just mix up what that swatch, there's a
Right.
color
Right.
tube
Yeah.
associated
Yeah.
with that swatch and put it on their head, I'll get that result. When it's like, that's not how it works. It's a 1 + 2 = 3, meaning like what's in
Yeah.
the color tube or in that swatch plus what's on their head is going to give you another color. So we'll never actually
Yeah.
end up
Yep.
looking like that swatch. My big thing is going, it's, you know, everybody's got a phone now, right? A device of some type. It's like, look at pictures together. I tell stylists to create their own portfolios of their work. And, a big one for me is I always joke about how blonding or basically lightening people's hair, and it doesn't have to always be like platinum blondes, but just lightening people's hair. That's what bought my home. That's what paid to raise my kids, right?
Yeah.
I joke, it's like, "Hey, blonding paid for my whole lifestyle, just blonding
Yeah.
people's hair," and granted, I did other
Yeah.
things besides that, but that's probably one of the most popular things in hair color is people going lighter, right? But within blondes, there's several ranges of depth, like how do you want that platinum blonde that's, like, almost fluorescent white? Or are you looking for, like, a softer caramel blonde that's, between brown and blonde? But
Yeah.
on top of that, there's different tones. Is it cool, like a more ashy cool tone? Is it warm, more golden, or is it more neutral, right?
Yeah.
And so I think having those portfolios out is important. I think, I've heard people say like, "Oh, I can't be blonde. Blonde doesn't work on me." They'll say the same about reds, and I've never found that to be true. What's true is they have the wrong tone of blonde or the wrong tone of red, because
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
people's skin tones, like I've got the type of skin tone that warm colors, like, you see all the pinks and reds in my skin if I have warm shirts on or, I mean, it
Right.
just, like, brings it out, right? But if you put,
Yeah.
like, a blues or greens or grays, like, some more cool tones on me, that actually, like, softens my skin tone. So I know that I need cool and toned colors. In fact, again, if for people that are watching the video, I had a platinum blonde faux hawk, I guess it's been 20 years ago about. So
Love it,
probably,
man.
yeah, and it was platinum blonde, and I had the big old dark mustache with it, so it looked very,
Wow.
like I looked like I belonged to some '70s reject punk band probably, but, I thought it was hilarious. I actually let my students blonde my hair, as some of our
Wow.
first students in the school, and,
Wow.
but, you know, if but before we toned it to make it a cool tone and it was golden, it looked horrible on me, right? Like, it's
Mm,
like, "Oh, man, against my skin, that looks awful," but we used a really strong blue-based toner and knocked that gold out of there, and it's like, "Okay, now it
yeah.
actually works against my skin," and so I think, you know, again, whether that's super unique, I don't think it is. A lot of people know about talking about tonalities, but really following that 5 steps to formulation, it's completely your roadmap, and if something goes wrong with the hair color, it's because you either missed one of those steps or misdiagnosed one of those steps.
Yeah. And as you move through those steps, are you telling the client, "Hey, we're gonna do 5 steps here," or is that internal?
It's more internal. It's literally just how you get the formula for what you're gonna mix up
Uh-huh.
and put on their hair. The 5 steps to
Right.
formulation, it's all, you know, I teach in my I do some chemistry color classes, and, you know, we use science, it's chemistry, to do permanent hair color or permanent hair color. And the thing about science is it's when I say science is unchangeable, I mean, we find science is changeable, meaning like our understanding of science, right?
Yeah. Right.
I mean, at one point with people thought the world was flat and then they realized,
Right.
oh,
Right. But
and
your point
I
is
guess
gravity's not gonna change tomorrow. Gravity is gravity,
exactly.
right? And
It's
1 and
like,
1 is
yeah,
still 2, and, yeah,
two
the math is math.
hydrogens. Yeah, two hydrogen with one oxygen is always going to be water. It's not going to one day be like,
Yes.
oh, you got a different chemical out of that. So, so that's my point with hair color. It's like, um, when when you mix certain things, you're always going to get the same result.
Yeah.
But so where the problem comes when a color doesn't turn out, it's the human element, meaning they formulated wrong, they missed a step. It's not the science. And I've seen that with stylists that like you can tell don't really understand the formulation process and the chemistry, and a color doesn't turn out. I've seen stylists like blame the colors, like, "Oh, I'm using this new color line. It's," you know, and they try to act like the color's no good. And it's like, well, that color line is
Right.
using the same science and chemicals as every other professional hair color line. The
Yeah.
problem is you missed a step, you know?
I remember in college, it was a little bit after college, I moved into this house and I was renting, but they let me paint it. They said, "You can paint, but just keep it neutral." Cool. Well, I was trying to go from a red to a white, and
Okay.
they make paint primers tinted. So you can, like, tint it towards a specific color, and they're like, "You need to, tint this one," anyway, and I didn't listen. I was like, I wanna save money, da, da, da." And ended up having to just put, like, coat after coat after coat after coat because the variable of what was the base, I didn't consider that. I was like, "Oh, I'm just gonna keep putting it," and it just kept bleeding through and bleeding through and bleeding through, and it's like, yeah, you have to consider the base. You have to consider what are you putting it onto? I used to be a redhead, myself, and whenever I see a kid who's a redhead, this is true story. I should say 95% of the time when I see a little kid who's a redhead, like little, like under 10, I'll walk up and I go, "I used to have really cool hair just like you. Don't forget that your hair is cool." Because I didn't love my red hair. I thought it was kind of a weirdo little kid, and kids are mean to other kids, and whatever. Um, and and yet it changed over time. And I remember like getting a coloring once, and it was really hard for them because they couldn't go from, I guess they weren't used to going from red to whatever I was going to because they weren't doing the chemistry. They didn't consider the base. You know what I mean? So having these conversations with people and helping them understand, like, we have to factor in these different things. Is that good for the stylist and the client? Who's the conversation for the most?
Well, when we're teaching, obviously, our students, we really teach them how to understand how to diagnose the hair, like you said. Because again, if you get the base wrong, and to your point, it's not just the color. Sometimes it's the porosity of their hair, meaning like how porous the strands are. Are they damaged? Are they going to take color quickly? Or
Wow, interesting.
um, even the texture. Like you'll get some hair that's very got fine texture with a very compact cuticle, and it's hard for the color to lift out like if you're going lighter. So there's some of these steps, but if a stylist truly understands that, and they should, that is a good conversation for them to have with the client. Sometimes it's about tempering expectations, or not necessarily tempering, but explaining the process it's going to take, because you will have clients that come in sometimes that want this, whether it's like a red that's really hard to lift blonde because that's similar. It can be very hard to get them blonde. Or maybe someone that colored their hair dark and they want to go back to platinum. It's like that's not a one appointment fix. This is going to take a couple appointments, right?
Really?
And if you can, yeah, and if you can, in layman's terms, explain the why to the guest, you're going to have a lot better opportunity to keep that guest and to make them realize. I've always said you don't want to overpromise and underdeliver.
Right.
The worst thing you can
Right.
do is tell a client like, "Yeah, I'll get you blonde today," and then you've
Okay.
bleached the
Well,
smithereens out of their hair's damaged, and it's still orange. You know what I mean? It's like,
right.
"Oh,
Well,
I
let's
didn't
do
mean,"
this then.
and then you're trying to explain.
Yeah, don't explain after, explain before, right? It's about
Yeah,
expectations, you know?
yeah,
So let's do this real quick. Let's just say that I come in and I've got, red hair, like the most fiery red hair you could think of, and I'm super light skinned, as a lot of redheads are, very, very, pale, and I get sunburn easily. This is my childhood I'm talking about here, right? So,
yep, yep.
and I go, hey, I want to be this. I want to go over to this color, right? Or maybe it's in a situation for a woman. They want to go to this color. What would your language be if their expectation was not? They literally just signed up and for a color, and you walk and this is a new client, and they go, I want to go from A to L instead of A to B. You're like, hold on. Or maybe it's A to D.
Yeah, yeah.
And you're like, well, we got to go B and then C and then D. You know what I mean? So how do you communicate that to them without it sounding like you're just trying to upsell them to get them into more appointments?
I think it is a delicate situation, but it's really giving them the why it goes through that process and and
Yes.
and how you have to do it to get the proper result. If you just start saying, "Hey, we can't do that all today," it sounds like a skill issue. Like, "Oh, my
Okay.
skills aren't
Well,
good
let's
enough
do
to
that.
get you there."
I love the
But if you
practicality of your years behind the chair. So let's just pretend real quick that my wife comes in and give her a color that she has and a color she would switch to that would require. What does she have and what would she want to switch to that would require multiple visits?
I'll give you an example of a client I think of that she was blonde for years and went to, like, she called it cherry cola. It was like a dark reddish brown, and she wanted to go back
Okay.
blonde. So that's a prime example. And
Okay.
she wanted to be
So
back to,
she's
and
cherry
her blonde
cola
was most really, yeah,
and she wants to be
which
blonde.
isn't a
What
real
would you
color,
tell
but that was what she called it.
her?
So,
it was
I
it
mean,
was
and I
on a
got why,
color
like, it
chart.
had the,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, but I always joke when they come up with these funny names, cherry cola, mushroom blonde. It's like, what? But anyhow, um,
Marketing.
she
Marketing.
wanted to go back blonde, and I explained to her, I said, "Hey, this is gonna be a multi-process thing because number 1, dark hair is hard to get light once it's artificial dark, and then reds are one of the hardest colors to get completely rid of to get back to blonde." And so I kind of explained the process. Hey, we can probably get you like a medium blonde in one visit. I told her it's probably gonna take about 4 visits to get you back there, and we'll have to do some deep conditioning treatments because that's a lot of lightener, a lot of um, ultimately it's bleach. People like to use the word lightener because it doesn't sound as harsh as bleach.
Yeah, right, right.
And it's
Yeah.
it's not Clorox bleach, obviously, but it's a lightening process. And I explained to her it would take several steps if she wanted to keep the integrity of her hair, because her hair was also long. It's like, oh, we could try to bleach it to smithereens in one step, but your hair is going to be thrashed. It's going to feel like straw, or it's going to break off. Right? Those are kind of your two
Wow.
options.
Wow.
And my big thing was always talking about keeping the integrity of their hair, especially if it's a woman that's got any length to her hair and likes having some length. It's like she probably doesn't want a pixie cut. You know what I mean? Um,
Yeah.
so kind of explain like, hey, if we do this properly, you're going to keep your hair in good condition, so it still feels like hair. Because sometimes you can do so much chemically to it, it no longer feels like hair. You know what I mean?
The thing
And
I love about that, I want folks to take note of this. If you just heard Nathan's explanation, maybe rewind 60, 90 seconds to hear it again. What you ended up doing, Nathan, is you basically said, hey, I want the best for your hair. So someone said, hey, I want to change this palette. And you said, okay, but we would break the palette. We would break it, what we're working on, potentially harm it if we tried to do too much. So it's sort of like saying, I want a rock that's bumpy to be smooth, and I want you to do it right now. It's like, well, okay, but we would risk cracking the rock in half if I really try to make all that. So we got to chisel. We got to work at it in steps. And so what they heard you say was not, no, I'm not willing to serve you. It's, I care about your hair not just today's visit, not just today's dollars. I want and I love the integrity, the feel, right? The richness, and you can always positive words that are true of your hair. The color can change, but your hair itself, we don't want to break that in the process. And I would just assume that most consumers don't. I'm not calling them dumb, but they just don't know. They don't know that. Oh, someone tried to do this in one step. They would do what? Yeah, that's not good.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that was always the approach I took. And I shouldn't say always. I was a new stylist once too that felt like I was desperate for clients, and I remember overpromising probably in the first 6 months of my career, overpromising and under delivering to a client like, "Oh yeah, I'll get you blonde." I knew it was a big process. I was gonna be able to charge a lot for it, I thought, and I was broke, right? And so I'm like a new stylist,
Yeah.
and I was hungry, and I mean, I spent all day on this lady's hair and still didn't have it quite where we wanted. And her hair wasn't in great shape when we left. And, I was so disappointed in myself afterwards too. Like,
Mm.
why did I do that? Like, I knew she wasn't gonna be a long term client as a result. It's like that was it was a one time deal. Whereas, like, if I would have done it properly, I could have had her back in 3 weeks or 4 weeks and seen her again. And, and that was really a turning point for me of realizing, like, when you take care of someone's long term goals with their hair, they're gonna be a lot happier with you than if you're just trying to, "Oh, I've got a big ticket item sitting in my chair right now." You want that
Yeah.
long-term guest, you know?
Yeah, that's a great question to ask yourself is what kind of service do I need to give this person today for them to be a long-term guest?
Exactly.
Because if you only need them to be a short-term guest, it's a different. I don't expect the person when I go through the drive-through at a fast food restaurant to be like, "How was your day today?" I don't expect that. But I also have been to a stylist who says like nothing to me. And I'm like, this is weird. Like, I have an
Yeah,
expectation of service that's different from the drive-through person than the person who I'm sitting in front of for 20, 30 minutes. Like I have an
exactly.
expectation of service. And so what do you need to do to keep this person long term? And part of that is just to be honest and say, I'm sorry your expectation was that this would be a one-time visit and changeover. It would be irresponsible for me to promise that and try to do that to you today. And I think when someone hears you say that, they're like, "Oh, wow, okay. I appreciate." Hopefully, they would say, "I appreciate that." That's an informed, kind, professional decision versus, "Oh, you're just trying to get more money out of me." You know.
Yeah. Well, and if I
So
can give you an
go
actual
ahead,
oh, sorry. And I can give you an
go
actual
ahead, please.
example where to that point where I had this client that did that, um, I told her it was gonna take 3 or 4 appointments. I said, "It's gonna take a few months," which, to be fair, I warned her before she went dark. In fact, she had about 4 or 5 appointments in a row. She wanted to go dark. That in a way, it's not that I talked her out of, but I told her, "Hey, here's what's gonna happen." And I gave her all the things like, "It'll look great. I think you can do it with your skin tone. I do like the color." But I said, "You've been a blonde for years. I think you're gonna wanna go back blonde." And I told her how damaging it was gonna be for her hair to go back blonde. It was gonna be a big process. And so she had about 4 or 5 appointments where she's like, "You're right. Let's stay blonde." Then she finally went dark and did it. And I said, "Okay." And we went through that whole process again of here's the results. If we do it, when you want to go back blonde, here's what's going to happen. And she's like, I know, but I'm ready to do it. And so we did it. And literally after about 3 months, she was done with the dark, which isn't very long, right? And
Wow.
I had her, I think I did 2 appointments with her getting her back blonde, and she wasn't where she wanted to be, which I told her it'd be about 4 to 5 appointments. And then I didn't see her again for like a couple months. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, she came back. Her hair was blonder, still not blonde, but, like, she'd had to cut, like, 4 or 5 inches off. Her hair was very long, it was about waist length, and even the hair that
Whoa.
was still there was pretty yeah, her hair was still pretty damaged. And the great part about being honest with a client like that and telling them it's gonna be a process and that you're taking out looking out for the integrity of their hair, at some point, she was probably frustrated that even though I was honest, that it was taking as long as it did, and she told me she went to someone else thinking they could get her blonder quicker, and what they did is they destroyed her hair kind of and still didn't get the right result.
So she
And
had to cut
so
it because the bottom part was destroyed, basically.
it was so fried, they had to cut, like, several inches off, about 4 inches off, 'cause,
Oh,
it was and, I mean, her hair was
jeez.
still mid-back, right? But it was, like it was not as
Yeah.
long as it had been, and the best part about that is then she was super loyal to me because she realized I was honest to her, about the process and what it was going to look like to keep her hair in good shape. I mean, she was so loyal that she actually moved to California. And for about a year and a half after moving to California, she would still fly back to Boise to have me do her hair. I mean, she had
Wow.
family there she'd visit too, but she would schedule her trips kind of around when she needed her hair done until her husband finally told her, like, hey, you can't keep flying to Idaho to get your hair done. You know, it adds a whole lot of expense to your hair appointment when you start having a
Yeah.
round trip
Yeah.
flight as
Got
well.
my
But
hair cut for $2,000. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, the point is like, and it was kind of a great experience. Not a pat on my back, but like it was a great experience for me to have her go to somewhere else and then come back and realize like it's like it's like, hey, see, having integrity and telling them like, here's what it's really going to take. It gained even greater loyalty from her actually straying. I put that in air quotations to another stylist because I was the one that was honest with her and I told her it was going to be a process and as a result she came back to me knowing like, hey, Nate did care about the long-term results here.
Yeah. Here's an encouragement that I think Nate, that story is a great example of. And this is a larger truth, but it's also very true in business. I'll combine two right here. Is one is if you don't know something, say I don't know. I'll figure that out, or I don't know. So don't pretend you know when you don't know. That's like just a life lesson. I learned
Exactly.
that in a great business book by a guy named Patrick Lencioni, and it was basically like if you don't know, just say you don't know because if you go, oh yeah, 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 and then people keep talking about it, and you're like, oh, I didn't know then, and they keep talking about it, and they think I know what I'm talking about. And I don't know, So if you don't know, just say you don't know, okay? But the other is when you tell the truth, you only have to remember one story, and that's just the truth. And if they go,
100%.
hey, I really want this done, if you tell the truth and you just go, in your brain says, that ain't happening. You need to tell them that I can't do that. I need this. I want it to go all blonde today. Your brain's going to say, you can't, there's no way. Now, don't say that.
Yeah.
Use Nate's language of, well, in order to keep the integrity of your hair and not to be too harsh, and, worst case scenario, you'd have to kind of change the texture and da da da. Da. But when you just have one story, which is like the hard truth, a hard truth is better than a soft lie, right? So
Mhm.
just tell them the truth and say, "Hey, I understand your expectation was to do this in one visit. The reality is, for the integrity of your hair and all that other great language Nate used, you tell them the truth, right? And that's going to give people, even if it disappoints them, I'd rather disappoint people with the truth and make them happy with a lie. You know what I mean? That then you
Yeah.
have to go, oh yeah, I can do that in one visit, and you're in your brain, you're like, I don't know if I can do that in one visit, or if you should. You know what I mean? So Nate, I love that example. I love also you admitted, you're not batting 1,000, you don't do it perfectly, but you learn from that, and then you do it better the next time, right?
Absolutely. I mean, if you're not
Well, folks, I hope you'll take that and you'll apply it to your consultations. Nate, I want to give you the last word. Any advice or encouragement to those who want to do a better job setting expectations, and maybe it's just repeating something we already talked about. But I want to give you the last word on setting expectations for people who want to be colored.
I think to your point, like being honest with people about like whether a color will work on them or not. Knowing what the limitations are is the biggest factor, I think, in being honest with the client. You need to know the limitations. You need to learn those, and you've got to let people know there are limitations. So many of us want to people please, which I mean, we are in the customer service business, but the long term effects of being honest and saying, "Hey, here's what it's really going to take." You're going to have a much better reputation as a stylist, as like someone that's a straight shooter, that's going to give them the proper results rather than someone's going to try to cut corners and do it all in one fell swoop, right? And I think that's, you kind of said it too. It's that honesty thing. If you're honest with your guests, if you tell them what it's really going to take, they're going to appreciate that honesty when, especially if they go to someone else and who's dishonest or like, you know, tells them they can do something they can't. It's going to show the integrity of you as a hairdresser, which your reputation long term in any business is really all you have, right? It's
Yeah,
it's like you deliver what you say you're going to deliver. So
love it.
I think
Well,
that's
Nate,
it.
thank you as
Integrity.
always for your wisdom and for the practicality of your advice. Folks, I would encourage you, if you do color consultations, just stop, go back. You can listen to it at 2x or 1.5x or whatever on whatever app you have. I guarantee it has that feature. Listen to it again. Listen to that specific language that Nate used. Practice it, use it again and again and again, and it will keep people coming back. It'll keep your integrity intact, and it'll set expectations so that you have a successful outcome and successful relationships with your clients, which is a longer, healthier business. Thanks, Nate.